Hello again and thanks for tuning in. We're going to look at the topic of first cousin marriages today. Now, recently there was a question raised in the Houses of Parliament at Prime Minister's Questions, and a question was directed at Keir Starmer about first cousin marriages, and this has prompted this video. So what we're going to do first of all, we're just going to have a look at the question that was asked of Keir Starmer first of all, and then we'll take things from there.
Question, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much. A marriage between first cousins carries significant health issues, many of which aren't even knowable until post-birth. When practiced generation after generation, there is a significant multiplier effect. In addition, the real impacts for the openness of our society and women's rights in our country are also significant. After all, there are significant dynamics in sharing a same set of grandparents. On Friday, this government has a choice to let my bill go through to ban first cousin marriage to committee stage. Will the Prime Minister think again before instructing his whips to block this legislation?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've taken our position on that bill. Thank you.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
So it appears like the Labour Party and the Prime Minister have taken their position, and there were some giggles from the crowd after he said that. It's quite sad that MPs should choose to giggle at that stage, considering we're talking about things like cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, and other heart defects, neurological disorders, stillborn, intellectual disabilities, and physical deformities. So quite nice there for the MPs to have a little giggle at the end, and I think that goes to show the unreality that a lot of these MPs exist in when they're debating these things. They don't really take them seriously. It's just a kind of a point of order. It's all a big game to them, when really the gentleman here, the Tory MP, was raising something that was quite important to the people of this country, I would say, and it's akin to British values and what we deem acceptable as a culture in the United Kingdom. Now, just to present a serious argument here with regard to first cousin marriages, what I'm going to do before I give you my views on it, I'm going to play you a video from a gentleman. I'm assuming he's a Muslim. He certainly comes across with the viewpoints of a Muslim, and he kind of puts a case forward here for first cousin marriages, which I think is quite a brave thing to do in Parliament, because it's quite a strange thing to fight for when you're kind of fighting for things like cystic fibrosis and, physical deformities and sickle cell anemia, things of that nature. So it is quite a thing to argue for. So I'll put that on here and I'll let you listen to what this gentleman had to say.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Right Honourable Member for Basildon and Billericay states, there are documented health risks with first cousin marriage, and I agree this is an issue. This is an issue that needs greater awareness on. Virginity testing, forced marriages, and the freedom of women forced marriage must be prevented, and the freedom of women must be protected at all times. However, the way to redress this is not to empower the state to ban adults from marrying each other, not least because I don't think it would be effective or enforceable. Instead, the matter needs to be approached as a health awareness issue and a cultural issue where women are being forced against their will to undergo marriage. In doing so, it is important to recognise for many people this is a highly sensitive issue, and in discussing it, we should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. An estimated 35 to 50% of all sub-Saharan African populations either prefer or accept cousin marriages, and it is extremely common in the Middle East and in South Asia. The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds and helps put families on a more secure financial foothold. However, as is well documented, it is not without health risks for the children of those relationships, some of whom will be born out of wedlock. Instead of stigmatising those who are in cousin marriages or those inclined to be, a much more positive approach would be to facilitate advanced genetic test screening for prospective married couples, as is the case in all Arab countries in the Persian Gulf, and more generally to run health education programs targeting those communities where the practice is most common. I would therefore urge the House to vote against this motion and to find a more positive approach to addressing the issues that are caused by first cousin marriages, including the health risks and the consequences of modern conflicts and displacement of population around the world.
Now, in response to that, you've listened to a very brief outlining of the argument from the Tory MP, to which Keir Starmer and the Labour MPs seemed to find funny that the argument was just dismissed out of hand, and they had a good giggle about it. Then we listened to Iqbal Mohammed discuss his reasons why he believes that first cousin marriages should be completely acceptable in Western culture. Now, often with these types of arguments, there's a gravity towards wanting to address each individual point related to an argument from the opposing person. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out a case quite directly and quite succinctly, I believe, as to why first cousin marriages should not be allowed anywhere near the United Kingdom at all. I think it's preposterous. And I think it's very silly to do so. And we are going to look at some of the effects of first cousin marriages in a little while. But safe to say, this isn't a practice that should be legal in this country, I believe. So one of the issues around first cousin marriages is that they have been practiced in many cultures throughout the world and, through historical periods as well. But in more modern times, they've become a subject of ethical, medical and social debate. And here are some of those main arguments against the concept of first cousin marriages. So, first and foremost, you have an increased risk of genetic disorders. So one of the most widely cited concerns is the higher risk of genetic disorders in offspring. So since first cousins share about 12.5% of their DNA, there is a much greater chance of inheriting recessive genetic diseases. Now these include, but are not limited to, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, Tay-Sachs disease, and certain heart defects and neurological disorders. Now, while the risk may not be overwhelmingly high in a single generation, continuous cousin marriages across generations significantly increases the probability of genetic defects. So we have this kind of exponential effect goes on. So it keeps happening, and as we go through the generations, then the chances and the percentages of an issue cropping up to do with genetic disorders increases as we go on. And what there is a kind of a narrowing of the diversity of the gene pool, and with that comes all sorts of problems. Now, number two is, simply speaking, a higher infant mortality rate and birth defect rate. Now, this includes things like, children born to first cousin parents are significantly higher risk of being stillborn, having a very low birth rate, having intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, having physical deformities as well. Now, the risk of birth defects in cousin marriages is nearly double that of unrelated parents. So that is quite a multiplier there. Now, outside of the health implications, there is also social and psychological concerns. So first cousin marriages create complex family hierarchies, structures, dynamics, however you want to put it, and that brings with it potential issues, such as, let's say, there's a marriage that fails. What it does is it puts a massive strain on the family. It also has a huge limiting factor on social integration. So in cultures where cousin marriages are common, it can significantly reduce the opportunities to mix with wider society, which kind of feeds in to the social cohesion argument that we do tend to hear a lot about. And it does create these marriages within families, within communities, and it's particularly where they are arranged, it can create abuse of women, etc. Now, while first cousin marriages are legal in some countries, as Mr. Mohammed was stating, others have banned them due to health concerns and ethical concerns. So, for instance, first cousin marriages are illegal in most of the United States. They're certainly illegal in China, South Korea and Russia. So some quite large civilizations there. So certainly in Western civilization and certainly in China and Russia, they don't want to go anywhere near first cousin marriages. It puts an increased burden on the state as well to do with health. So if there's a lot of these children are born with various defects, then it puts a massive strain on the health service, because those children there are going to need care from the start of their life, unfortunately, until the end of their life. And obviously this comes at a massive cost to the state. Now, outside of ethical and financial issues, you have just got generally within communities here a weakening of genetic diversity. So what that leads to: vulnerability to hereditary diseases, reduced immunity strength for the person's whole life, and essentially a bit of a long-term health decline in certain communities. So, an example of this might be, the royal families of Europe in history, who did often marry close relatives. They did suffer from a lot of genetic disorders, such as Habsburg's jaw and haemophilia. And so that's an example from history where this hasn't worked out very well, and it's certainly a practice that in the modern day should be avoided where possible. Now, here's a little example of a first cousin marriage, and the effects on families, the effects, of course, on the children themselves. It's terribly unfair on the children, given that the whole reason for a first cousin marriage is supposed to be security and stability and financial stability and family stability, but yet the people that bear the brunt of this are the children, the unborn children of these people. And I think it's a disgusting practice, really. It's not humane, and it's against most of the things and the qualities and ethics that I hold dear. It's just an inversion of truth and an inversion of sanity as well. So in conclusion, as you know, when I present some of these arguments, that I do like to be as fair as I can. I like to present both sides of the argument and steelman things where I can, look at the argument and say, well, what do I think? Am I stuck in my own bias a little bit here? What's the opposing argument? Let's listen to a sensible opposing argument. However, in this instance here, with regard to first cousin marriages, I think it's a medieval, barbaric, unpleasant, unethical practice that should definitely be banned in the UK. There's no arguments for it. There's every argument against it. And I think that it's very, very, very telling that the Labour Party en masse are being whipped into line in order to vote against this bill. And I also think it's extremely telling on Keir Starmer to just stand up and dismiss birth defects there like cystic fibrosis, sickle cell anemia, etc. And I think that goes into the character of the man and also the character of the Labour Party, given the little sniggers that came after. I thought that was a disgusting spectacle there, just as I feel that first cousin marriages isn't a practice that should be allowed in the UK. It's barbaric, it's medieval, and we should never, ever, ever allow it. Thanks very much for your time, I appreciate it.